Can I have Pak Irham with me, please? Irham, can you join me 2 minutes? Can we all just stand up, please? There's so much of information overload here. I'm feeling tired. Are we feeling tired? So much to take. I just want you to go in circle in your own places. Just go around the table. Just move your body a little bit. I know it's too much to take. I want to acknowledge that. Yeah?
Dalam satu hari ini kita biasa banyak informasi ya, supaya kalau misalnya rasanya terlalu banyak informasi yang masuk, itu kita bisa saling share. Ya, we can share the information.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. That's fresh. My heart is beating now. Thank you. We're going to take 2 minutes. We have a piece of paper on our tables. And I'm sure we all love drawing, right? We all love to draw. I want you to draw a building, any construction, some building that you want to create. Maybe an apartment, maybe a bungalow. Just draw it on a piece of paper.
Silakan menggambar di kertas kosong, gambar apa aja. Dari kreativitas yang ada di kepala kita sekarang, silakan gambar apa aja di kertas.
Maybe quickly draw a building, please.
Gambarnya yang baik-baik aja ya.
So we all done? Are we done in our places? Do we agree that any building, just draw a building.
Oh, ini mintanya katanya minta building kalau dia nih, minta gambar bangunan.
So do we agree that any building that we draw has to have a foundation? Does it need to have a foundation? Yeah? So our next presenter, Sherry, is going to speak of the framework of OD, the foundation which OD builds on.
Ya, ini cerita bahwa kalau kita lihat gambar building, gambar bangunan, itu kan pasti selalu di bawahnya ada fondasinya. Nah, ini fondasi. Jadi pembahasannya ini adalah apa yang menjadi fondasi dari OD, ya, di mana OD berdiri.
Yeah. So I'm happy to introduce Sherry. Well, there's a lot I can speak of Sherry. Sherry is the president and CEO of Alex Reedy and Company, a Chicago-based management consulting firm. She's also the former board president and chief advisor of the OD Network International. Comes with a great experience of leading or in consulting for Fortune 500 mergers of organizations, of engaging with leaders across various countries. So I request all of us, while she's presenting, maybe look at how locally these concepts can connect.
Ini tadi cerita siapa yang menjadi pimpinan dan lain sebagainya, mau dilihat konteks lokalnya ini ya, kalau dilihat dari, jadi pembahasan-pembahasan kita kan berangkatnya dari Amerika banyaknya. Jadi kalau kita lihat, kita bumikan di Indonesia, seberapa jauh sebetulnya bisa diletakkan di bumi Indonesia.
And before we start with Sherry, I want to request that whether we are OD practitioners or managers or leaders, this framework is going to help us all.
Sherry Duda ini adalah yang terlihat sekarang gambarnya di depan. Dia sudah live. Hi Sherry, how are you? Ada di sini. Dia memang datang dari latar belakang yang berbeda. Jadi apa yang kita bahas, coba kita lihat, kita bumikan di Indonesia. Apakah iya memang ini punya relevansi dengan kita? Jadi dari kemarin, hari ini, pagi ini, sekarang kita coba lihat pembahasan sekarang ini seberapa jauh. Nanti kita coba bahas setelah ini ya, apakah memang iya atau tidak relevan.
Good evening, Sherry. Over to you.
Thank you. And can you hear me okay? Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you, everyone. It's just quite an honor to be here with you tonight, my night, your day. I saw all that dancing there, and I got so jealous that I couldn't be with you there live to join you. We'll have to try to figure that virtual dancing out later. That sounds fun. But so you all have been talking about OD for the last day or so. Curious, raise your hands if you've got this OD thing all figured out. Does anybody have the OD nut cracked yet?
No hands so far, Sherry.
No hands put up, okay. Well, I think that you might be thinking, like myself, that I feel very privileged to be in this profession of OD, because it's one of the only professions that I know of, other than the CEO and some others that are in the C-suite, that actually see the entire lens of the organization and are able to impact it. Again, thank you. I'd love to share with you my journey the last 4 years of the OD network, and give you some perspectives and things that I've learned from a macro view of looking at OD globally. And I think three things have stuck out to me. One is that there is a need to have clarity around the OD brand. There certainly is an art and a science to it, but I believe it can be taught and it can be shared, just like many other professions. I think I agree with the person who just was speaking about the impact of technology. I think the digital age is going to materially change the role of OD, as well as many other professions as well. It's going to have a very big impact on the workplace. And then thirdly, I would say that OD is really a lifelong journey. And so I wanted to talk to you about a study that I led over the last 4 years to try to figure out what makes a successful OD practitioner. And before I do that, I thought I'd start with, why did I want to do that? Because I think sometimes the why is more important than the what. Whoever's working with me on slides, you can turn to the next slide. Hopefully you see a number that says 10,000. So 10,000, what does that number mean? What it means is that within the OD Network website, there's an area called What is OD? And the OD Network was receiving 10,000 visitors per month in that area of the website. So there's great interest around the world because most of those visitors were not from the US, they were from outside of the US on what organization development means. And as I've talked to practitioners around the world, it's one of the hardest questions they have. When someone asks them what is OD, it's very difficult for them to answer that question. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see many of you will know Ram Charan, one of the leading management consultants in the world. He said in the HBR magazine, it's time to split HR. And what he recommended was splitting it into HRA for administration. So HRA would report to the CFO, and then you'd have HR low, HR leadership and organization. And that would report directly to the CEO. And this article was only in 2014, but when I started in OD, I guess it's been 25 years now, OD reported into the CEO. So the professions of HR and OD have blended over time, but we've sort of come full circle here in terms of some of our beliefs of how OD should be structured. And if you go to the next slide, Ed Lawler, professor from University of Southern California, very respected, distinguished professor, had said in Forbes as well as Huffington Post that maybe the HR function should just rename itself to organization effectiveness. And you know, that to me in my mind, because I've sat in HR and I've sat in OD, I see quite a distinction. So in my mind, I was thinking that would take quite a merger for that to actually happen. But I know what Ed was thinking about. He was thinking about that HR has a branding issue. And then something happened that, if you go to the next slide, that was probably the worst thing that could happen to HR. A bomb showed up on the cover of HBR, which probably isn't very good for someone's brand. And since our brand is so tightly knitted together with HR, I thought that we should start to clearly distinguish, if there are differences, what are the differences? And then the third thing in the next slide that I experienced as I was going about trying to learn across the globe around OD and what people's thoughts of successful OD were, what I sometimes felt like I was on an island. And what I mean by that is that what I found was that the profession of OD is very fragmented. I found these islands of location. We were fragmented by country and by region and by state. We were fragmented by subspecialty. Our profession is so large. You have change management and talent management and leadership development and strategic planning. And then there's parts of it that we're not sure if they're in or if they're not in, but it's a very broad field. And I think, as I heard someone else say as well, change is at our core, and that uniquely defines us. I also saw some islands around associations. So we have the OD networks. Each country tends to have its own OD network. We have IOTA. We have a lot of different separate identities within OD. And those subcultures are very important for community, and what I've realized. But what I was looking for is what binds us together as one, because I think as one, you know, a brand is all about a promise. So what is our one brand that we want to make very clear? So if you go to the next slide, this is really the essence of the study that I sought out to find clarity. I wanted to know what were the trends that were going to impact OD over the next 5 to 10 years, and gather those insights, because if we think about our own development, we have to think about development into what? And so what I wanted to do is project into the next 10 years to see what that world would look like. And then try to figure out what superior performance looks like from that place. So that was the study. And I'll share a little bit with you about the demographics on the next slide of who participated. With some cajoling and help from friends like Roland and others around the world, we were able to have 982 global OD, mainly OD leaders. There were also chief HR officers and others that contributed as well, but mostly these were OD folks that contributed around the world. It was a global survey, but I would say that about 75% came from the US, and then 25% of the data that I'll share with you today came from the US and 25% from outside. In terms of levels and years of practicing OD, most of the folks that participated were directors, so people with 11 to 25 years of practice within OD. And there was a really good mix of internal practitioners and external practitioners as well as academic professionals and students. And I'm kind of buzzing along here on the slides, so hopefully someone is keeping up with me on your end. Just let me know if you'd like me to slow down. And then in terms of the industry, we also had a really good mix of private sector, nonprofit, public, and government companies contributed as well. And then on the next slide, you can see that most of the folks that did contribute were from what I would call, in my work experience, medium-sized companies. They're between 2,500 and 25,000 employees. So what we wanted to do, and I'm hoping that our discussion can be very interactive, is on the next slide ask you a question, and we can use some of the technology there in the room to get your views. But one of the next things that I sought out was, what are the business trends that will be impacting the workplace in the next 5 to 10 years? And I'll share what the survey respondents said on our side here, but I wondered what you all think in the room. So can we pause and find out what you think?
Thanks, Sherry. Yeah, the question is there on your iPads, so you might want to respond to that. Maybe we let our inputs come and we ask Sherry to continue. Sherry, over to you.
Yes, thank you. I am not able to see the results on my side, but if someone wants to share that, that'd be great.
Okay, just hold on.
Yep.
Yeah. Can you see the data on your screen?
I cannot, no.
Oh. Okay, I think what is emerging in the conversation here in the room is...
Now I can see that. Yep,
Now you can see it?
I can, yeah.
Okay, okay.
Thank you. I feel like a pilot on this end. I've got 5 screens open here, so apologize. But yes, I just saw everyone's thoughts. And what I would say is that they are very similar to what came back on our side as well.
Right.
Okay to
Okay. So I think, can we all draw you back to what Sherry is sharing? Can we have everyone, with our ears back to what Sherry wants to share? Over to you, Sherry.
Oh, great, thank you. So I'll share the results back, and like I said, it's very similar to what was shared in the room. But if you go in the next slide, this is in sort of reverse order of importance. 14% of our respondents around the world said that what keeps them up at night in terms of this trend is doing more with less. So people are feeling tight budgets, tight time frames, less resources, cost pressures, and there's this short spurt intervention, a need to get things done really quickly. That was the first thing that the folks were saying is keeping them up at night. if I go to the next slide, it's mastering fast-paced change. And we see this in the headlines all the time. What they shared with us is that they are often asked to restructure an organization multiple times. And just when they think that one organization redesign is over, another one is started. So change is happening more frequently and at a faster pace. And some of the folks within the organization are feeling fatigue over the change and the complexity of the change as well. So we had 16% of the folks that said that this is a concern for their workplace. The next slide, 16% also said that multicultural, multi-generational workplace is something that they are wrestling with. And most specifically, the trend that stood out was really being having cultural intelligence. So being able to blend different cultures within the workforce. They talked to us about the aging workforce and how to transfer knowledge within the organization. They talked about tech-savvy millennials, and some people are, wanting to use technology with everything they do, and where others really want the face-to-face types of communication, as well as just how do we collaborate across really a global organization these days. The next trend that stood out was really virtual everything. So when you think about leading and leading your teams, it's leading from anywhere in the world. It's sometimes working with a leader or a team that you never see. Most of my career was spent outside of the US, and I had teams in China and India and Australia and the US and Scotland. And it was always sort of flexing to what's the best time to have those meetings and to make sure that you can still get participation even though things are virtual, like the meeting that we're having today. And then 26% on the next slide said that it's globalization. So it's our global economy, it's competition, it's our suppliers, it's the pressures that we feel from global marketplace, and it's really how do you develop global leaders was on the minds of the folks that participated. But the number one trend that kept folks up at night on the next slide was really the digital age. So 56% of the almost 1,000 people that participated said that it's the impact of technology on social processes. So on how we communicate within an organization, engagement, all of the things that make our organizations human, believe that technology will impact those processes. And they also said that their concern is that as a profession, we're not using technology enough in our own practice. And they thought that we were behind in that area. So I went out to search for exemplars in the OD profession that were also, very into technology or were pioneers in technology. And Professor Bill Rothwell from University of Pennsylvania shared the name of one of his students. And I thought I would just, if we could show a video. This is Chad, and he is getting his doctoral thesis in OD with a specialization in technology. So here's what he had to say. We can run this video.
It's coming, Terry.
Okay, great.
I'm known as like a technology savvy in my program, but I think myself I'm not. I'm kind of of course I like kind of the new trend or new technology. However, I'm not majoring of the computer science or engineering. I just like that with that technology, what I can do. That is my interest. Same way, OD practitioner, we have to have, first of all, we have to get rid of some kind of the, some anxiety of the technology. Rather than that, have a more focus and interest in with that technology, what I can do. Imagine that. Then
So Chad was very interesting to talk to, and he's thinking about different ways to fuse technology with organization development. And one of the things that we were curious about with the room there today is, what are your thoughts around technology? And when you think about artificial intelligence or blockchain or some of the different things that are really shaping the workplace and really the world at this point, what do you think about that? What excites you about the impact technology will have on the workplace? And then what concerns do you have? We thought if you maybe talk with your table groups a little bit about that, and then we'd love to hear what you think.
Okay, so I think we are just getting the audience to respond to the questions, and maybe as the theme emerges, maybe something that you pick up which you feel we can speak with the whole room, and then we can connect to what we are talking about. The framework will help here. Thank you. Okay, maybe we speak around with each other and give our inputs into the co-vision, and then we work with Sherry to look at what's the intelligence in the room sharing here and talking about.
Or blockchain or some of the different things that are really shaping the workplace and really the world at this point. What do you think about that? What excites you about the impact technology will have on the workplace? And then what concerns do you have? We thought if you maybe talk with your table groups a little bit about that, and then we'd love to hear what you think.
Okay, so I think we are just getting the audience to respond to the questions. And maybe as the theme emerges, maybe something that you pick up which you feel we can speak with the whole room, and we can connect to what we are talking about. The framework will help here. Thank you. Okay, maybe we speak around with each other and give our inputs into the co-vision, and then we work with Sherry to look at what's the intelligence in the room sharing here and talking about. Okay, I think as we are looking at the inputs emerging, maybe we'll put it on the screen. Are we ready? So as we are looking, okay, I think we are looking at interesting views coming from the whole room, and I want some of us here to kind of come and interact with Sherry on what has been the table discussion in the room. So anyone who wants to come forward and interact with Sherry, that what was the table discussion, what was the buzz before we reached this conclusion? Ilham, maybe we can have some of the participants come and talk about what was discussed in the table. Yeah? Can we have, please, one or two participants? Can we have one or two participants, please, to come forward and discuss? Maybe Indra, Indra, excuse me, can I ask you to come forward and interact with Sherry? Yeah, yeah. Anyone can come forward? Just to understand what, yeah? Well, Sherry, I think we are sensing that we'll have to maybe work with the trends emerging and probably pull them to interact as I see
Yeah.
it. So maybe you can take over?
Yeah, no, that's fine. And, it's interesting. And some of these insights that came back, so this can be looked at a couple different ways. And what I encourage is really having a growth mindset when it comes to technology, because it will make us more efficient. There's some advantages of working from home and things like that that are very, very positive. The concern that came back from our survey is people feel, though, that they're behind and that, all of a sudden we need to sort of catch up. And that kind of feeling can be scary. We had some gurus from all around the world came into Chicago, where I'm from, to talk about blockchain technology. And I don't know if any of you or all of you have studied what that is. I actually, up until a couple of months ago, didn't know what it was at all. But what was interesting about it is you had people from all over the world just trying to anticipate how will this blockchain technology impact us. And when you think about, there was attorneys in the room kind of contemplating, what does jurisdiction mean in a virtual world? And more than anything, people were just asking questions. And so I think for our profession in OD, getting into the debate around technology and thinking and placing ourselves into the future would be helpful for the development of our people today. What I want to transition into, because I know I'm stopping you from lunch here, and that's next, is to talk to you about the Global OD Practice Framework. And if you go to the next slide, I want to talk about very quickly what was important when building it. So in terms of the principles, there were six. Six things that,
okay.
Sure.
Go ahead, Sherry.
Can you see those?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Is that there have certainly been plenty of competency models in the past, but what I was looking for is something very practical that we would be able to, people that would be able to use in their work on an everyday basis in order to make an impact. And that we did do this future scan, and we started to think about the future so that we can build capability today for what's coming tomorrow. Looking at a collaborative process with many people that gave input across the globe and tapped into thought leaders like Roland, like Ed Shine, many others around the world that participated. And what we created was something called, I named as version 1.0, almost like your iPhone, because there'll be plenty more iterations and it's just a start. And if you turn to the next slide, this looks like a complicated machinery, and that's what it certainly felt like the last 4 years. But it was about having a project team chartered. We worked with a group called Workitect, who were competency architects themselves, did a literature review of what the competencies in the past have looked like. And then what I would say is most of this project was really about getting out there and talking to people and understanding what they felt was important for OD competence, and then creating a prototype model and then refining it over and over and over again with multiple iterations. So, and what we produced then is this model that I named a Global OD Practice Framework, but it could certainly be named anything we want. In the future, this is 1.0. But so as you can see, there's 5 different areas to the model. I call them capability areas: systems change expertise, efficient designer, business advisor, credible strategist, and informed consultant. And I wanted them to be sort of like results. So systems change expert. If you invested money into developing your resources, this is what you would get for investment in OD would result in expertise, would result in efficient designers or business advisors or strategists. That's what you could get from investing in OD. So for the time that we have, I wanted to give you a high-level overview of each of these areas just to get a sense for what they're all about, not necessarily going into too much detail to overwhelm, but enough so that you get a solid understanding with some examples of what they're all about. And what I'd like you to think about as we kind of go through here is think about yourself in terms of the work that you do, whether you're an OD or not. We're all, in one way or another, if you're managing macro organizations, we're all OD consultants. So think about the areas that you feel like you have strength, and then also think about the areas that you may want to think about developing in as well, because we'll talk about that after this overview. So if we can touch on the next slide, which is systems change experts. What do? They transform resistance into innovation, in my view. And there's 3 competencies here: systems change leader, culture builder, and innovator. And I will use a personal example on this one because I think it brings all of those competencies together. So I worked with a $20 billion global petrochemical company that was actually failing. And the CEO wrote a letter to all the employees talking about how he was going to transform this company. And I worked for the parent company of this division. I just wrote the CEO, who I did not know, an email, and I said, it's not going to work. And so his assistant called me the next day, which made me a little bit nervous, and said, Ralph would like to see you. He's flying in to see you into Chicago next week. He wants to talk about why that plan isn't going to work. And I shared with him that, this wasn't an operational issue, it was a cultural issue. And you have to approach those types of issues very differently, as I think I heard Barbara explaining as well. And what I shared with him was a very different approach that was more bottoms up, to understand the thoughts of the employees around the state and where they were. If it's a failing business, my belief is that most of the solutions are in the organization. And we worked on, firstly, creating an environment of trust. And instead of sort of project managing the resistance, as many people do, we looked for ways to transform resistance into energy. And we did that by listening to the employee population and understanding what was important to them, what their pain points were, what their ideas were, and what the barriers were to success. So this is an example of how we leverage different strategies to transform an organization. In this one, I know that there are many people that say cultural change is slow. I've never been a big believer of that. This organization went from 0.9 billion to 2.7 billion in a year and a half, and had a very significant change in the organization's health as well in terms of their engagement. So I think change can happen fast if the right levers are pulled. This is an example of what systems change experts do. The second area, efficient design. So you've got a picture here of all of these different matrixed organizations, people sitting on different floors. What is it that we do within OD to make the complex simple, really, with all of these folks that live within the organization? We do several things, and I think that when I think of my own career in OD over the last 25 years, I feel like I'm a designer. Not everybody feels that way, but that's how I identify with OD, is that we design experiences. The experience that you have in the room today and the last couple days took some experienced designers to pull together so that you have a fabulous event. We design business processes. We design teams so that teams are effective. And we design organizations so that the people and the technology and the process and the culture are all working systemically together. And we're able to make the complex simple through data analysis as well. So we do have the macro view of an organization, and we're able to look at all the different functions and business operations and target the areas that need to be looked at from both a strength and an opportunity standpoint. And to the discussion we just had, technology is transforming the way that we can go about doing that. Some of the ways that we used to do in the past are changing, and our challenge and opportunity is to keep up with technology. People that make the complex simple. It says my internet is unstable. Can you still hear me, Santosh?
Yes, we can hear you. Just maybe it just went off for about 2 or 3 seconds. Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great. The third capability area is business advisors. So this is really just exactly what you would think it would be. It's understanding the strategy, it's understanding the industry that you're in, the competition.
Sure, yeah, okay, now you can continue. Yeah, now the slide has changed. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay.
No problem. So at Business Advisor, there's 3 competencies there: strategic catalyst, results-oriented leader, and trusted advisor. And to be a business advisor, it's being sought out for your advice. And so in order to be sought out, it's about knowing the business and knowing the industry and the competition and the pain points of your stakeholders, not necessarily about what you can provide, but it's about what's important to them and where are they in their journey. And for me, you know, when, again, most of my career has been outside of the US, when I go to other countries, I try to speak the language of the country, even though I don't do that very well, just as I try to speak the language of finance. And that's very important. So understanding EBITDA and how a business is profitable and what are the areas that contribute to an organization being financially viable, those are the things that people, your stakeholders care about. So again, when I'm in another country, if I'm in France, I speak French. If I'm working with business leaders, I speak their language as well. It's not because I don't believe in the humanistic side of OD. It's that I'm just being respectful to the language that they're used to.
I think, Sherry, that's a very important point you are mentioning, because in the breakout yesterday, what emerged clearly was what is the return on investment for the intervention? How much money will we save? It's a language which I think any organization across the globe understands very clearly. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yes, absolutely. It's very critical, and you know, project management is another piece of that confidence, is to be able to say, where are you on the project? It's another language that we use within business. It's a common language. So if we can resonate with our stakeholders and what's important to them, that brings us that much further ahead in the conversation. So we can contribute with our expertise around the organizational and health of an organization. We can be heard at that point. If you go to the next slide, the fourth capability area we call credible strategists. And I brought up a study that I just noticed the other day that I thought was interesting. And this was a study focused on CEO credibility and reputation. And what it's looking at there is the study is studying the percentage of market value attributed to CEO reputation. So which countries believe that CEO reputation and credibility is linked to market value. And as you can see there, Indonesia actually had the highest percentage believing that there's a very strong link between those two things, especially if you compare that to sort of Canada and the US. So I thought that was interesting because credibility is very important. And if you go to the next slide, credibility is something that, you know, we don't just produce ourselves. It's something that our stakeholders, it's sort of an end result of our actions. And credibility is so important as a source of currency. And it turned out in this study that we did, it was the #1 competency for success within OD is the ability to influence your stakeholders. So credible influencer, collaborative communicator, globally diverse integrator, those three are what we're calling credible strategists. And if you ask the question, well, how do I do that? Then, and if you dig into the competency model, it'll give you lots of examples of that, but it's about structuring dialogue and situations in a way that makes sense. So thinking through the order of who you talk to and why. It's gaining stronger expertise in areas that you're unfamiliar with. I found myself in a blockchain conference all day and I didn't know what it was. So, you know, these are things that when we don't know how to do it, it can be scary. But it's learning those areas that are unfamiliar. It's understanding diverse cultures. It's being very concise in our communications and having courage to tell the chief executive officer, your plan won't work and here's why. So these are some types of things that the competencies that are very important within OD. And then the last competency area, one other slide on the next one, which says most challenging part of the OD role. I wanted to point out in the study that while credibility was the #1 differentiator in terms of success, it was also 20% of the respondents said it's the most difficult for them, or the most challenging part of their role is to gain trust and gain influence of their key stakeholders. Okay. Yep. I couldn't read that sign, but I'm imagining that we're almost out of time here. 10 minutes. Okay, it was either 10 minutes or 10 seconds, so we're good. So then the last capability area is informed consultant. And so this is about, you know, being a good consultant. It's a primary foundational piece of OD. And you, Peter Block, I understand, is with you and has written some fabulous books, as you know, around consulting. You have the emotional intelligence is part of this being an informed consultant, and that's about emotional intelligence and use of self, and a lot of things that make us more self-aware, so that we can understand the nuances not only of ourselves, but of our environments that we're in. And then getting some of these fabulous books like Roland and others' books around organization development and what's new and what are some of the theories behind and the science behind what we do. Those are all very important things. And within OD, as I said before, it's so, you know, you can go deep, you can go wide, or you can try to build a lifetime and do both. And I encourage all of the above because it's just such a fun journey. But what we wanted to do after that sort of overview of the Global OD Practice Framework is to go back to the slide that has just the model on it, if you could bring that slide up, and just ask you what competencies do you think you're most developed in? And then following that, is which competency would you like to develop the most? So let's start with what competency are you most developed in?
Are we feeding it in? Yeah, I think we'll just quickly look at some of the participant responses. Maybe they can come over or I can hand over the mic to them to look at which is the one they feel they are most developed at. So maybe I'll go to this table. Okay. Anyone would like to volunteer which competency they are most developed in? Anyone here at this table? Sherry, I'm just trying to get some response from our participants on your first one, that which is the competency they are most developed in. So I'll kind of come here. So we have one response as a business advisor. Can I have your name, sir? Joseph. Okay, thanks, Joseph. Anyone here would like to respond? Which competency, according to you, is most developed? Okay, we have another response, credible strategist. Can I have your name? Okay, we have B say here that credible strategist. Okay, one last one. Results orientation, so that will be informed consultant. Okay, informed consultant, that was Rick. Okay, thanks. That brings us to the second question. Which competency you want to develop most? And I just am aware that we are going to have a hard stop in another 5 minutes. So maybe some of us can quickly say which response, which competency I want to develop most, because as we summarize, we kind of bring this session to a close. So which competency, according to you, is the most, do you want to develop most? Okay. Which competency do I want to develop most? Anyone wants to? Okay. Sherry, can you still hear us?
I can, yes.
Okay. Okay, so I think I'm going to take this opportunity to really thank you for sharing. And I think what has personally touched me as a OD practitioner is the source of currency, credibility as a source of currency for the CEO, because that is linked to his market contribution. One curious question which is playing on my mind is, how do we really put our hands on the copy of your studies? Where do we go? Whom do we ask?
So there are a number of things in process at the moment. One is a self-assessment. So people will be able to self-assess against the competency model to see what their strengths are and opportunities and things like that. And then the findings of the study, we hope to publish soon so that you'll just be able to sort of see, you can certainly have the executive summary now, but we also hope to publish that, the summary of the study soon.
Okay. I think before we really bring this session to a close, one last opportunity. Anyone in the room has a question for Sherry? The time is now to seize it. Anyone has any question to ask to Sherry? Okay, we have Eric.
Hi, Eric.
Hi, Sherry.
Hi.
Thanks for your presentation.
Absolutely.
Hi, Sherry. Thanks for your presentation. I own
Hi.
a consulting company in OD. It's supposedly one of the 3 biggest in Latin America. And I have one question. When you present a proposal with your scheme of all these different specialties, how do you agree upon yourselves to put it in clear to the client? How much time do you spend in the diagnosis? What is the kind of feedback? And who is the one that runs and is responsible for putting in the proposal and giving feedback to the client?
So your question is, who is responsible to create the proposal for the client?
I beg your pardon?
Who is responsible for, is your question, who is responsible for creating the proposal for the client?
Yeah, let's say I got a client and I come up with this proposal about all the people that have to be involved in it. How easy is it to get all these different characters, professionals to work together and to come up with a proposal that you know is the first stage of any consulting engagement?
Yeah, so I'd be curious to see what you do, but it takes a lot of conversation back and forth with the client before it even gets to any type of written proposal. I want to clearly understand what their challenges and opportunities are, and what are the different ways that we could potentially help them solve that. And I want to better understand the why behind it and the value of fixing it. So what are the pain points and why do we want to fix it in the first place? So really understand all of those inputs first through conversation before it even gets to the proposal stage.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I think that was a wonderful session, Sherry, and I like the way you kind of were on your feet, gauging what the sense of the room is and pacing your presentation. So I think I now invite Maja before we all break for lunch. And I really appreciate the time you have taken, Sherry, today to be with us here. Thanks so much for your time. Thank you.
Apa kabar semuanya? Kabar baik? Oh, good. Sudah lapar? Oh, okay. But before we go for our lunch break, I just want to make a few announcements. One is, we know that you're asking for the slides. So tomorrow, when you do register, please give your calling card, okay? Because that's the way we will be able to give you all the slides. Now, can you please, yes. For our breakouts this afternoon, we have 4. And so we have 1 in this room, and 1 at Garuda 5A, 1 in Garuda 5B, and 1 in Garuda 6. So you have in your copies, here are our breakouts. So we invite you to choose your industry, plus we would like to invite you also to go to your rooms earlier. Thank you, and have a good lunch.